Hey everybody, Monica Bodierski here, artist and author of the Shadowland Tarot. How are you all doing this week? I hope you had a great week. There's been a lot of interesting energies I've found in the last little while. Thank you for leaving feedback, by the way. It's really nice to hear what you're experiencing, especially in times like this where we're a little isolated. It's really nice, and I think other people appreciate your comments as well, and it encourages them to share. So thank you for that. I received this beautiful card and from a wonderful person named Melinda, who thanked me for working with her as an artist interested in wellness. And through one of the classes, one of the online classes I taught. So I just wanted to say, Melinda, thank you very much for the card. That was a really pleasant surprise. We don't always expect to get thanked. Okay, let me be honest here. I don't ever expect to get thanked. And that's not because I'm cynical, and it's not because I think people aren't kind. It's more that sometimes I get so caught up in the making and the doing that I don't really stop long enough to look around myself to see how I'm affecting people. Not always the best thing, but that only happens when I'm really into creating something, and then I get that kind of hyper-focused thing. So once again, thank you very much, Melinda, for taking the time to thank me for that class. That's wonderful that you got something out of it. And I'm really happy to hear that you're finding your way putting art and wellness together in this kind of spiritual package. So, you know what we have coming up this week? Well, it comes up all throughout the year, but we don't often pay attention. So today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the moon and lunar eclipses. Lunar eclipses are something that have always held fascination for all of us and all of our ancestors. As an earth-based practitioner and someone who identifies as a walker between the worlds, because, well, spirit communication and the realms of the living and the dead for me are really not so far apart. The moon is something that our ancestors have always interacted with, from agricultural cycles to just noticing their cycles. Whether it's a full moon, a dark or new moon, waxing or waning, the colors that we sometimes see, that orange glow, sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's further away, it seems sharper. People have paid attention to that, and for good reason. The moon affects us. It affects all of us, whether we'd like to think so or not. I think whether that's because we're consciously noticing the moon, or whether it's because of lore or mythology, the eclipse, as I was saying, has held a very special kind of fascination and sometimes just induced all-out fear, because there were many, many cultures who felt that when the lunar eclipse was occurring and it was visible, by the way, that is known as a blood moon, that kind of an orangey look to it, for many, they felt that the moon was being attacked by some kind of a beast. And many shouted and tried to get the offensive creature away from the moon so that it could return to its normal glow. That's an interesting kind of a perspective, because it's certainly showing us the concern and the care that we have about the moon and the lunar energies. Now, how it affects each of us is entirely personal. You will notice similarities when people can't sleep because it's a full moon. People feel restless, and don't forget that these moons are also have planetary aspects. So, we're coming into an eclipse that is a moon in Gemini, and that has some very interesting energies as well. it is very airy, and Gemini can be very talkative and holds kind of an interesting space when you think about the lunar eclipse and what that means. So what does that mean? Well, the sun and the earth and the moon are all aligned during a lunar eclipse. And the moon is in the earth's shadow in the northern hemisphere, and it is visible by all in the northern hemisphere, unlike some solar eclipses. Some people feel that the moon's energy in the shadow is very similar to the dark moon or the new moon, in that it's a time to be reflective. The fact that it's called the blood moon can hold some very interesting connotations to it, and that many feel, myself included, that the lunar eclipse can bring about some pretty startling things, realizations, and just our perspective shifting. So, what I did this week was, with the 2 decks that I have, and you can try this with any deck, of course, I did a pull, as we say, of 4 tarot cards just before this video, and with 4 equivalent Lenormand cards. This is an effect for those of you who've been asking an aspect of shadow work. So you can do this individually. What I'm talking about, though, because the moon is in the earth shadow, is very broad space shadow work, meaning that I feel that this is going to affect all of us. When you delve into your personal and very Jungian definition of shadows, that's slightly different. But this is an aspect of shadow work for me, and please feel free to try this out. So the 4 cards, I did shuffle the deck, I drew them at random. Yes, actually I did draw them at random. Was very interesting. How I used the cards was I drew the 4 tarot cards first. And why did I use 4? I think because with the moon, I generally think of the 4 aspects of the moon that I work with, which is the full moon, waning, dark moon, and then waxing again to full. My question in my contemplation here was, how will the eclipse affect us, all of us, on a large scale this week? So, the 4 cards that I pulled were very clear, and that isn't actually why I pulled Lenormand cards as well. I just did that because I like the energy of the cards, and they add that extra layer of depth, and they always seem to have a connection. And not that I'm just making a connection, they just genuinely seem to come up somewhat connected, and I'll show you what I mean. The first card that I pulled was the moon card, not coincidentally. And this moon card has a mask. I think I've explained my fascination with masks before. And sometimes that we're not seeing things in their full light because it's nighttime. And it isn't a negative connotation here to the moon so much, or interpretation I should say, so much as just saying that the moon can be unknowable at times. And in moonlight, contemplation is better than making decisions because we don't see the full picture. The Lenormand card that I pulled that went along with this was the bear. And the bear, it can be strength. Depending on how you read Lenormand, it can be a block. It can be a strong woman. It can even mean finances. I took this to mean you might want to hold still for a moment, because I'm just looking at the image of somebody perched on top of a sleeping bear. It's kind of a hold for me, okay? The strength is in a pause. And I read it that way, yes, because of the tarot card. So it's given me a slightly different interpretation. The next card I pulled was the 4 of Swords. And the 4 of Swords, well, you know, it's about resting and taking it easy. It seems like that's what a lot of us have been doing, But isolation isn't necessarily psychological rest. It could be physical rest, but, it can be very stressful. So this eclipse is saying, just stop. And it's reinforcing my bear card of pausing. The next card I drew, and again, this is for all of us this week, because I find the lunar eclipse lasts more than a day. Oh, the Tower card. Hello, Tower. We've talked about the Tower card before. I don't find it particularly negative, but it is very strong in how surprising realizations can be. That epiphany, that whole, whoa, what am I doing? How did I get here? Oh, suddenly all the blinders are off and I'm seeing far too clearly. I kind of liked it the way it was. So it isn't that clarity is difficult. Sometimes it's just the shock and surprise that comes along with it. And sometimes this is about how we see ourselves, how we see others, what we've done, what we'd like to do. So this energy too of Gemini and of this lunar eclipse, it's going to bring this kind of, whoa, surprise. And the card that I pulled with that, I will do those 3 cards after. I'm going to talk about the 3 tarot cards here. The 7 of Cups was the next card, okay? And that one really, really, oh yes, I can't make a decision. I'm in my feels so big time because it's cups and water. That's what this eclipse can do. We had that, rest, okay? I'm reflecting. And then the, I reflected and I've come to this conclusion. Now I'm compelled to make a decision, but I can't really. There's a good reason for that. Again, that's Gemini energy, and that is a lunar eclipse. That is exactly it in a nutshell. How the Swords card, the realizations, and I pulled in the Lenormand deck for this card. Again, that was the 4 of Swords, resting and relaxing. I pulled the Fox card, which is a little bit about deception. So while you're resting and reflecting, you may realize that there's been some form of self-deception or you feel deceived. Just relax with that, okay? Our mind can play tricks, and sometimes we have that flip-flop depending on our energy and how we're doing in the moment. We can suddenly feel like the hugest lie we tell ourselves is, aha, that is the truth. I'm totally useless here. That's the actual truth. Don't get stuck on any one particular belief at this moment. That is not what this reflection is. It's kind of like the meditation practice of just letting things wash through your mind and not holding on to them. Let them go. It's kind of a cleansing, to not stay attached to any one of those thoughts or feelings. That card of the Tower here, that surprise, the sudden realization, you know what? I figured it out. That is likely to occur. Maybe just because you slowed down long enough, and that lunar eclipse can really pump up that awareness kind of an energy when you reflect. And the card that I pulled with that from the House of Shadows is the Garden card. Okay, it's about, maybe a little ironically right now, given our isolation, and some of us more so than others. I'm in a city with total lockdown again through the 2nd wave. So seeing community or garden alongside the Tower is telling me that a lot of us will have the sudden awareness of what isolation has actually done to us. Whether it's creating anxiety or depression, compassion for others, extra work, putting ourselves in danger because we're very brave frontline people who go out there every day, or as I said, whether it's because you're feeling completely cut off, whether it's because now you're dealing with people only virtually, you're going to have some kind of realization of impact, positive and perhaps negative, that it's had on you. But there is that, oh, wow, I didn't realize it had that much of an effect on me. Okay? And the final card of the Seven of Cups, which may make you start to feel compelled to make a decision about this then, well, not surprisingly, I pulled that darn devil at the crossroads. Okay? Although I just got a guitar, I'm thinking I might make a deal. But let's not decide. It's the lunar eclipse, okay? So that is telling me, because interestingly, both of these cards are in effect about that point at which you are just going to make a decision. And you may want to, because you think, that often accompanies having a sudden realization. So what I'm going to suggest to you all, myself included, I do take my own advice, usually, is don't make a decision. Just don't make any major decisions tomorrow. Or whenever you're watching this, if you happen to be running into another lunar eclipse, as I mentioned, there's several throughout the year. Each one has a slightly different planetary aspect. But if you're watching this right when this is occurring, don't make any major decisions. Okay? Okay. Well, I think that's it for this week's video. I might start doing a couple a week. I said that very tentatively because I really don't want to promise things and then not deliver. There are people who make videos every day. Good grief, I don't know where they get the time and energy from. But I'm feeling like I might start to do some process videos, and show a few overhead shots of the spreads that I'm using and or the art process. I've mentioned this before. I don't know how you feel about that, but if you have any kind of input, again, of what you'd like to see, please leave it in the comments below. And don't forget, you can find me at the links below on my website. If you'd like a reading, if you'd like to take a class, I do divination classes, and I teach everything from tarot to Lenormand reading, bone and curio casting, and reading runes. So, thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please hit like, please hit subscribe, and don't forget that little bell. I always forget to mention it. Apparently you're supposed to. It'll let you know whenever a new video's up. Okay, my friends, have a safe and happy week and enjoy the contemplative atmosphere of this lunar eclipse. Until next week, bye-bye.